On the east coast of Scotland, on the Firth of Forth, lies one of Scotland's oldest religious sites. You may not have heard of it because it is not open to the public. It is found in the private grounds of the Carmelite Monastery of Dysart on the outskirts of Kirkcaldy. These are the caves of St Serf.
And I have a very special opportunity to visit the caves of St Serf. Now, the actual community here is a new community which was built post-Reformation, but the site itself, which we find these caves and other aspects of the area, was an ancient site.
As was the practice in the early days of Christianity, previously pagan sites were transformed into Christian ones.
Standing on the site is a yew tree, which the sisters have informed us after archaeological study and dendrologist study that this is perhaps the oldest tree in Scotland. It is at least 2,000 years old and indicates that this is a very important site. You'll find that across Scotland, sites which have yew trees on them indicate a previous pagan presence. So further evidence inside St Serf's Hermitage that this was in fact a former pagan site in pre-Christian times is the Pictish carving here, which Sister Anne-Marie tells us is possibly of the rising sun, and that's how they viewed a deity or god in that time as being the sun. Interesting that when the arrival of Christianity in Scotland, the Celtic cross came from the formation of the cross being imposed over the sun to show that the true religion, the religion of Christ, has come and the truth has prevailed over the old pagan religions.
It was here in the 6th century that St Serf, seeking isolation and prayer away from his abbey, chose these caves as his hermitage. The name Dysart is thought to derive from the Latin deserta, alluding to the concept of withdrawal, influenced by the spirituality of the early Christian desert fathers, hermits of Egypt. During St Serf's lifespan, these caves would become an established hermitage for his Celtic monks, also known as Culdees.
It was here during the life of St Serf, in this very cave where he lived, where it said he battled the devil. It was here he was obviously seeking his isolation, contemplation in his hermitage, living here, where the temptation came. And it said that he overcame the temptation of Satan here, going out from here henceforth to spread the gospel around Fife and the wider areas. And that's why he's known as the Apostle of the Ochils. There's not much evidence that the cave here was lived in. Obviously, the spirituality of the monks was rather austere. Dysart, meaning desert, they wanted that minimalistic prayer life.
The larger cave faced east and was used as a chapel where Mass was said.
This part of the cave complex is where the holy sacrifice of the Mass was said from the time of St Serf in the 5th century until the Reformation. So for 1,000 years, the holy sacrifice of the Mass was said here until its abolition by the Scottish Reformation.
Of all the saints of Scotland, there is none more shrouded in myth and legend than St Serf. Much important records were destroyed during the 1560 Scottish Reformation. What we learn of St Serf comes mainly from the Aberdeen Breviary's records of Scottish saints and other sparse documents and accounts. St Serf, also known as St Servanus or Serban, was born around the year 500 AD. He founded an abbey at Corus in Fife and served there as abbot. According to legend, St Serf, whilst abbot of Corus, rescued the then Princess Thena and her infant son St Mungo. St Thena, or St Enoch as she is better known, was pregnant outside wedlock. Her angered father King Lot of East Lothian tried to kill her by drowning her in the Forth. By the grace of God, she washed up on the shores of Corus. Finding them, St Serf took them into his refuge and raised the boy Mungo, who would go on to be the founder of the city of Glasgow and a great saint. On the same site, underneath the later 13th century abbey, which was dedicated to Our Lady and St Serf, are to be found remains of Pictish altars thought to be the original abbey built by the saint. St Serf established this as his missionary base from where he preached the gospel in Fife and the surrounding areas, becoming known as the Apostle of the Ochils. He is associated with lots of churches, ruins and schools throughout east central Scotland. St Serf died in the year 543 AD and was said to be buried in his monastery at Curus. His feast day is celebrated on July 1st. In pre-Reformation times, the caves were a focus of much pilgrimage and pageantry. After 1560, however, church lands were confiscated by the state. By fortune, in 1561, the ownership of Dysart was transferred by the returning Catholic Queen Mary of Scots to her supporters, the St Clair family, who converted it into their manor house, maintaining the building and caves. Over 300 years later, in 1930, when the Carmelite order purchased the property, the site was once more back to its intended purpose of Catholic religious use by these nuns. May we one day see our nation return to the faith preached by St Serf. St Serf, pray for Scotland.